which had been accepted in the FBI in important national security cases for as long as I was in the Bureau.
Surreptitious entry is forbidden by law when used to gather evidence to convict a person for a crime already committed. But when used for the purpose of preventing a crime from being committed, especially in the field of espionage, it is an accepted practice in every civilized country in the world.
In the espionage field, the worst thing you could do would be to get a warrant, because a warrant has to be served. And if you aren't in your apartment when we come to serve a warrant, we have to leave a copy of it attached to your front door. So if you're a Russian spy, what does that tell you? That tells you they're on my tail, I better stop what I'm doing, I better pull back. From the counter-espionage standpoint, you can't let the enemy know what you're doing or how much you know. So
in 1977, the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, under Attorney General Griffin Bell, pressed formal charges against FBI agents in New York, claiming that the use of surreptitious entry into the apartments of members and supporters of the Weather Underground had violated their constitutional rights.
I happen to know that the Civil Rights Division was recommending the indictment of from 50 to 60 FBI agents in New York as a result of this investigation. Well, that was, at that time, was when I felt I had to do something. So I came forward and made a public statement and said that I had authorized those, that if anyone was responsible, I was responsible. Ed Miller, who was another Bureau official, came forward a few days later and said pretty much the same thing. And it was as a result of that that Miller and I were indicted for violation of the civil rights of these individuals.
On April 20, 1978, Mark Felt and Edward Miller arrived at federal court in Washington, D.C. for their arraignment. 1,200 FBI agents and former agents awaited their arrival at the steps of the courthouse to demonstrate support. It was clear that more was at stake than the future of two men. The FBI itself was on trial by its enemies. From the beginning, federal judge William Bryant demonstrated hostility to the FBI position. At several points within the trial, he even took over the role of prosecutor when the Justice Department attorneys were too slow in doing so. On the last day of the trial, Judge Bryant told the jury to ignore all issues except one. Did or did not the defendants have approval for these entries from the President? This was an incredible instruction because the defense had never claimed that they had been authorized by the President. That procedure had not been instituted by the Justice Department until 5 years after the events in question. By injecting this element at the last possible instant before the jury retired, the fate of the defendants was sealed. On November 6, 1980, Mark Felt and Edward Miller were found guilty of allegedly violating the constitutional rights of American citizens. Their fines were over $8,000, but their total legal costs for defense, an amount raised by FBI agents and friends, exceeded $1 million. By 1975, the Justice Department under the Ford administration had come under the control of Attorney General Edward Levy. Since Levy had been a member of the National Lawyers Guild, the legal arm of the Communist Party, it was no surprise that a major portion of his time in office would be directed toward the destruction of the internal security function of the FBI. Levy inaugurated a series of guidelines for future FBI investigations. Under these guidelines, which were based upon recommendations of the National Lawyers Guild and the American Civil Liberties Union, the FBI could no longer investigate individuals or organizations unless there was already proof that they were planning a criminal act. In a federal lawsuit brought against the government by the Alliance to End Repression, the Justice Department further stipulated that the FBI could not investigate unless the crime was to be committed in the next 48 hours. But without the power to investigate, there is little chance to obtain such proof before the crime is committed. In the past, many bombings, hijackings, and killings have been prevented because the FBI had advance information as a result of prior months and even years of investigation. Now, there is almost no way to anticipate these crimes. The FBI also was told that it could no longer use informants inside terrorist or subversive groups if those informants participated in illegal acts. This sounds reasonable in theory, but in practice, an informant who refuses to participate in the illegal acts of other members of the group soon would be dropped from its innermost circles and would cease to be an informant at all.